Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to the Erudition Network. And tonight, it is Thursday, so we are here again for the Erudition Network Interactive Black History and Knowledge session. I am your host, Eddie Phillips. If you are new to the program, welcome. We really like to get new people to come in and watch the program every night or every evening that we're on the Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays that we're on. This session is dedicated to providing and teaching Black history. We do this every Thursday, and we do it so that we can inform and grow and educate everyone, not just Blacks, not just Black people, but just everyone on history. We like it to be interactive. I think that that's the thing that I like the most about this show. When we get people to come on, or people send comments in, or people send questions in, I enjoy it because I think that it allows us to do something that, probably isn't really being done in a lot of our classrooms and communities around the world, where we try to be very open to history and to knowledge, and to give everybody a chance to give their perspectives, their thoughts, and their questions on what they have been taught or what they understand. Sometimes we don't always agree, and that's fine, as long as we go down and we seek the facts. And that's one of the things that we definitely try to do on this show. We try to make sure, or this network, we try to make sure that we are providing you factual information. We encourage your questions and comments. Matter of fact, some of the comments that I've gotten and questions I've gotten over this past week is what I'm going to go over tonight. If I seem a little bit ragged, I wasn't feeling well today, so I'm going to put that out there in full disclosure to you all. Yeah, I was not feeling well at all today, but I refuse to not do this program because I think it is important for us to do it every week and to provide this knowledge. I was given a little bit of time to see if people were coming in because we started a little bit late, but I'm going to give it about another minute or so, and then I'm going to move on forward in what we're going to talk about tonight. I will tell you, I am very, very happy with the participation of people. A lot of folks can't do the live sessions. They can't get on during the times that we're doing lives, but I appreciate the fact that a lot of people still send me things in chat and questions and things. What I would encourage for you viewers out there who watch us weekly and who are really adept at sending us information, I would ask that you go into, we set up an Adroit Living group, and that is on our Erudition page on Facebook. We set that up There is an Instagram account for that, and there is a Facebook group page for that, for Tina's program, so that you can go in there. We want to be able to answer all of your questions and give you places to go to conversate and have these let's conversate the word, but have these discussions. But the more we grow this social media network, it is designed for you to put your questions out there. You don't have to send me a question per se in chat. You can get on any of these groups and ask an open question. And I promise you that it will be answered. I like that because I think it allows other people to get into the discussion. And I often, when people send me questions, I don't feel comfortable exposing who asked me the question, because it may, you sent it to me in a chat or a message. So getting into one of those groups allows for us to have these open discussions. It grows the programs and the networks. It allows you to invite friends and other community into the network, and even if they can't watch the live shows, to still participate and get their questions asked. So I really, really encourage you to do that, because it will definitely help us as we go forward in this venture. I don't mind you sending, and I want to make this very clear. I don't mind you sending me messages. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that doing this allows us to better serve everyone's questions. So I think that it would be a better way to do it. That's what I'm saying. So, all right. Well, I gave about another minute to see if anyone else was coming in, and I'm going to move on and start talking about some of the questions and things that I got this week, because I did get into, I wanted to go, my intention this week, this morning, was to set up some things so that we could talk about the unteachables. And I still want to go into that because I think that is an important thing for us to talk about. And if you don't know what the unteachables are, this is the history behind special programs and how America has, and I say America, but it is worldwide, how disability rights and things have affected Black special education and Black children, Black men particularly. Overwhelmingly have a huge hindrance to in what's being done with that. But I want to get into that. But I did not get a chance to get everything prepared, because I want to do that with a lot more visual and slideshow, more of a traditional lesson. So we'll probably get into that next week. I'll push it off again, and because I thought I was going to talk about it last week too, but other things came up during the session. But I want to get into that as we have all the kids out of school before the next coming school year. I want to get into the unteachables and that term and why they labeled our children as unteachable, right? And gave them a whole generation of race retardation and special intellect programs to foster the idea of holding people back. But we'll get into that. Tonight, I want to answer a couple of questions. Hey, if you're in here, please, send a hello, shout out, let us know who you are, especially if you're new to the program, and let us know that you're there. And bring in whatever questions that you have as we go into this session tonight. I got a question in earlier this week about slavery. My my brothers, he sent a article or a video. He sent the video, but I had discussed this situation about 2 years ago. But as we're in June and we're getting close to Juneteenth, I thought it would be a good idea for us to go into this a little bit again and me to cover this. I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory here. What happened for me to talk about this a little while back, about 2 years ago, was there was a guy, I won't give his name. There was a guy on social media, an older white man, who felt he needed to promulgate this lie about a man named Anthony Johnson. And this lie has been told on about slavery for revisionists for over a century, right? Over a century, people have been telling this lie about this black man named Anthony Johnson. And I wanted to address it again tonight on the program because it's starting its way around. What we find that happens a lot is that we don't check where we get our information from. I'll say that again. We don't check where our information from. And because we don't do that, we a lot of times regurgitate and put things back out here that aren't right or real. So the video that I got, it was a brother trying to teach, and I don't blame, I don't fault him for teaching. What's up, Key? Good to see you. Good to see you. There's my son. Somebody's always watching. Okay, that's good. I don't see you, but I'm glad you're in there. All right. Well, getting back to what I was saying. Let's see, we're ramping a little bit. This guy, Anthony Johnson, became notorious to the revision. I'm going to share this. Let's do that. My wife always says she likes visuals, and I know a lot of you all do. And I pulled a picture of this actual post. All right, so there's a post, right? So this is a post that's kind of, you'll start to see it, I'm sure, because it's starting to promulgate again, and people are starting to see it again. That said, Anthony Johnson was a black slave owner. So, and you see the revisions already start. They go, wait a minute, right? Like it's a lie. Like, there was no such thing as chattel slavery happened in America, and it was all black people that did it to each other. That's ignorant. But it says, so black Africans sold other black Africans as slaves all over the world, and in America, free blacks owned over 10,000 black slaves. Why do we never hear about this in the media? In almost every state, including South Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, and Louisiana, free blacks owned as many as 10,000 slaves in 1850. This is a lie. This is a lie. Truth of the matter is, Anthony Johnson wasn't alive in 1850, right? But notwithstanding, at the time doesn't make any sense. Let's think about something here. We act as if slavery didn't have differentiation. It wasn't differentiated because of time, during different times, and in different areas. So let's deconstruct this, because I saw the brother teaching it, say, if you go and you go look it up, man, you'll find that, but no looking at the date. And nobody's really looking at why Anthony Johnson is important, right? He does have the dubious distinction of going to sue in the American courts, right? Or before the American courts, made the first to hold go and actually sue for the right to keep someone in slavery. He does have that distinction. That's who he is. But one of the things that we need to also understand is that Anthony Johnson himself had been a slave. He'd been a slave. Mind you, he was he wasn't a chattel slave, but he was a slave. And unfortunately, as we look through what is becoming historical nonsense in this country because we refuse to teach it properly, we fall into the lie. Anthony Johnson wasn't around in 1850. He was around in the 1600s. As a matter of fact, Anthony Johnson was an indentured slave that came over with some of the first recognized slaves in the Americas. That's who Anthony Johnson was. And so this lie that he is owned these slaves, that's ignorant. The holding out that he himself had been bought over by the Dutch as a slave is left out of this. None of that is told. And the idea between indenturitude and chattel is not even discussed. On this program, we've talked about the differences several times. But if you push the idea that blacks selling and owning slaves, it's catchy. It's catchy for those who want want some argument to suggest that slavery wasn't as bad, or that white slavery, chattel slavery over blacks wasn't a thing. And we leave out the nuance. We leave out the nuances of enslaved people. Leave out the fact, like people like Anthony Johnson, and we blame them as if they were the only ones. Johnson was taught that indentured slavery, or servitude as it was called, wasn't the slavery that we see. What he was taught was that a person could be a servant and then work their way out of a contract and own land, which is exactly what Anthony Johnson did. He left the service of his master. He went and bought his own land. He worked in the system of that day and acquired servants, both black and white, under the indenturitude system. And he did exactly what he saw his former masters had done. And because he loved wealth, just as they had allowed him to learn how living like that could be, he wanted to stay a part of that system. Because he felt, this is from his own history, in his own words, it gave him the respect of other people, specifically wealthy whites. It gave him a distinction. So the idea that there were many, many more is ludicrous. The problem was that a man named John Casser, right, told a man, a visiting white planter that came over to Anthony's land, that his indenturitude was over. He told him that Anthony was keeping him against his will. He had fulfilled his contract. And John Casser asked to be able to leave. The white man told Casser, well, just up and leave. We do it all the time. So Casser left, and Anthony Johnson, sued the white planter who told his indentured servant to leave. He sued him for property damage, and he won. He won. Now, his distinction is not that he was the first person to own slaves. His distinction is he was the first one to seek for court damages against the loss of a slave. And we forget that. We also forget that because of Johnson, right? Johnson became a harbinger of chattel slavery, where people who were put into slavery and their progeny, or anything that came out of them, were put into perpetual slavery. Now, that didn't happen in the 1600s. That wasn't until the 1800s. But I will tell you what did happen during Anthony's time. Contract acquisitions between the Spanish, the British, the French. And it should also be noted that later on, as we got into the 1800s, the Virginia courts, who had given Anthony that victory, later changed the decision and placed a new requirement on the books as a reflection and looking back to Anthony Johnson's case. And that law in Virginia said that a Black person could not hold another Black person as a slave because it, and here are the words here, elevated and equated Black slave owners to the level of white slave holders. So this thing that's being put out here about Anthony Johnson that you all will see is wrong on its face. Blacks were not allowed to own all of these slaves as this picture claims that they were able to in 1850. They couldn't own another Black person because, not because that in itself was wrong, but because it elevated them to a level where they could feel superior or equal to whites, and that was a no-no. If you were to really go back in your history and pull up things like the Essential del Negro, which was a contract negotiation between the Spanish and others to perpetrate slave trade in the Atlantic. But if we only look at Anthony as the owner of a slave and not read the reality, and then we lie about the years, there's a complete difference, ladies and gentlemen, between 1600 and 1800. Complete difference here. The reversal of this law in 1643 is important. You cannot allow, this is what they thought, it cannot allow Black people to escape their Blackness by becoming superior or equal, because that disrupts the system. And that was the reality. I thought it was important to bring this up because when my friend sent this to me, the video of the man talking about it, I immediately flashed back that I had to cover this before because a white man, a revisionist, possible racist, had been sending this out. And he sent it to me as a challenge to say, hey, look. And I had to address that. That was in 2020. And here we are right now, in 2023, and it's rolling back around again. And this happens because we are not being taught these things. We're not being taught the facts, the history. And so we find ourselves regurgitating revisionist history. What is the truth about Anthony Johnson? He was a slave who was an indenture slave, not a chattel slave, which meant he got out of slavery. He was a businessman, not unlike the Irish who came over in indentured. But the difference was Anthony was black. And as the increase of black slavery increased from the 1600s into the 1800s and on, they had to stop that. He's not the first slave owner. If you look at your 1619 project that is out here, they tell you that people came over in indentured slavery at 1619. What they don't tell you is that before 1619, in the 1500s, blacks were working over here as regular people, as normal people, blacksmiths, sailors, shop owners. It was the need to bring the Africans over in South America and seeing the wealth of that fed what happened in North America. And as those times changed, things changed. How you went about your practices changed. If you go, and I'm going to try to find a link and try to put something in here for you all to be able to look this up. Right? The Essential Dead Negro. I think I put it out before, but I will put it in the chat so you can read that contract and how Spain came about that. This all has a lot to do with how Columbus and all of that all went down. The real Columbus Exchange. And we will go into that. But I wanted to cover that. It took a little longer than I wanted to, but it is an important point. As we get closer to things like Juneteenth, it's coming this month, and people being lost in the idea of American history and being lied to, because that is a lie. Another question that I got this week that was sent to me by another one of our viewers was the idea of Thomas Jefferson, that Thomas Jefferson wanted to end slavery, right? Well, there's nuance to that too, right? So what this alludes to is the Declaration of Independence. And I thought I bought one up here that talks about this. Wow, I just turned right to it. But when the original Declaration of Independence, the original form of it was written, Jefferson spoke about these things, these horrible things that the crown had done. And one of the reasons that the first draft wanted to stop slavery, not slavery, it wanted to stop the idea of slaves being bought over from Europe, particularly England, into the Americas, because the founding fathers and those who wrote the Declaration of Independence and helped to found America felt that the British were trying to send more slaves over with the idea of taking over the colonies. That's why they did that. That was the anger. That's why Jefferson, at his original form for the Constitution, said that he wanted to remove slavery. People get it twisted. He wasn't talking about giving up his slaves on Monte Carlo. He wasn't talking about any of the founding fathers who who enslaved people giving up their slaves. What he was talking about was the idea that we can't have secret agents over here. That's what he's talking about. So that idea, and again, I would challenge you to go back and read the copies of the Declaration of Independence. You can pull that up online, and you can pull up all of these things that were put in the original and what became the one that was actually sent out, and realize what Jefferson was actually talking about. But it calls for you actually going to go read and to study. Portuguese, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Al, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Where can we find the information about increased wealth of Black people owning slaves? I don't know what you're saying here. As I just said, it was illegal for Black people to own slaves. What is the fair amount of reparations? Well, it all depends on how you look at it. It all depends on how you think that reparations should be presented. Should it be by money? What is the cost of stolen land, stolen lives? What is the cost of multiple generational atrocity? Should the repair be multi-generational? Should it not just be, okay, we're going to give reparations to this generation for what we did for several generations? Because if you're really talking about repair, then understand that what we did, right? What was done was over hundreds of years, right? Hundreds of years. And I'm always telling people that they need to understand that, these laws were made. They were made, right, to hold us down. They were made to harm us for multiple generations. Everything that came out of that woman, they owned. If you were to go look up the law of it. So here's my thing with that, because I think that is a very good question. And I know that's a question that is out there on a lot of people's minds. But when they pass, and this is not a Harry Potter thing, because it sounds like it, it's always said it's not a Harry Potter thing. Partis sequit ventrum, which means that which is born follows the womb. That was a legal doctrine passed in the colonies in the 1600s after Anthony Johnson that we just talked about, that basically said everything that came out of that woman's womb was owned by the slave owner. It was perpetual slavery. So how many generations? How many generations were affected by that? So I believe, to answer your question, Portuguese, that we need to look at it multi-generationally. How are we going to best serve that? What are we going to put into the law? Because they put it in the law. If you could write a law to take away, why can't you write a law to provide? And I think that's a better way of doing it anyway, because what does that do? That doesn't tell what the argument is. It will overflood our system and we have to pay all of these people. We have to do all of this. If you do it multi-generationally for the next 200, 300 years, I know that seems like a lot. but that's what you did, then maybe we can we can repair what we did. We could stop the lunacy. It's a great question. I really do appreciate that question. The other thing, my brother sent me some. I'm trying to get through these questions, ladies and gentlemen, that were sent to me over the week. I appreciate everybody who's in here tonight. And if you have another question, we've been off about 35 minutes. We got about a good maybe 30 more minutes to go. Please drop a question. Drop a question. That's what we like. That's what we want to see. That's what this is. This is an interactive broadcast every Thursday, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. We'll be on. I will be on to discuss these things. But I got another question from my brother. Well, more something that he said that I should talk about. And I thought, again, I have covered this before. Maybe I didn't cover it as much as I should have, or maybe people have missed it. But we were talking about how breeding, how slaves were bred. And it goes into this whole thing we just talked about partus sequitur ventrum, right? Everything that came out of the female slave. And if we look and realize how badly this was, how people were bred, right? They were bred, women were bred like you breed horses and dogs. Men were used as stock. The average Black female slave was required to have up to 20 plus children. +20 children. And that's crazy. But that's what was being done. Pardon me for a moment. So when we look at that, right? It angers me. It's one of the things I don't like to talk about as far as history that much because it's so bad. Because if you look at the narratives, you see that slaves, even in their old age, 90-something years old, were still bragging about it. Now, they weren't bragging about, as I had to look at it, they weren't bragging about the breeding. They were talking about having so many children that they didn't know what happened to their children. In one narrative, a man named Luke, who was the father of 56 children that he could count. And it was because he was known as a giant breeder. He was making strong slaves. And so they bred him as stock over and over and over again. I talked about how young girls were put into breeding as soon as they reached their womanhood. This is a fact. Talked about how they were conditioned to the idea of sex at 12 and 13 years old. Sex with different men that the slave owner would bring in. not just the slave. Sometimes his sons, nephews, cousins, uncles, brothers. And unfortunately, when you see videos that go out on TikTok, which my brother sent, and they talk about this, I think they miss the actual nuance of where to tell you where to go. There's a great book called Breeding of American Slaves by Stephen Ashley. There are several other books I'll put in here too that take some of the narratives. You can always go through the slave narratives of multiple states, Mississippi, the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, and read the words of our actual people. Read their words. Know what they went through. Listen and read what they tell you from first-person source representation. There was a time during Reconstruction where we wanted to know this information with the hope that we wouldn't go back to it. And as times changed, people got tired of it. People got tired of it. And so a lot of that information, you go back and you read around 1880, 1890, and you start to see all of this information and you learn how people wrote it down. Because people always try to tell me, well, how you know that the information is correct? A lot of those people, especially Black folks, had no reason to lie to you. This is the life they lived. The records of the Underground Railroad, the records that were collected by churches, by state officials, the records that came during the processing of the Ku Klux Klan Act, where people had to testify to what they went through. So don't belittle the history of our people because they're telling you something that is so painful that you don't want to hear. How is the history you're talking about impacting current events, especially since we seem to be reinvesting a lot of historical property? Well, it affects us because once we don't, as we were saying earlier, if we don't know these things, if not, and I mean us, America, the world as a whole, if we don't know these things, if we are not steeped in them, we do AP World History courses, we provide tests, and we spend so much time asking about the king and queen of England, the development of European countries, but we very rarely talk about Black history or the history of people of color. We don't know our African heroes and heroines. We don't know the background of Africa, how it relates to South America, how it relates to the East. And because we don't know this, we can't draw connections. Our kids and our children and our families don't know who they are. We don't understand, they used to term us Africoid and Australoid. Those are terms that they came up to separate. And I say they, racist, bigoted people came up with. Ethnocentristic terms to keep everybody divided as a variant, as a subcategory. Recently, I was having a conversation with somebody about the Toba eruption. They didn't know what I was talking about. They didn't even know what Toba was. And I'd ask you people who are on here tonight, can you tell me off your head, why is Toba What is it and why is it important? Real quickly. But we don't know it. Because we hopscotch over history. Especially in America. And when we do that, we do an injustice generationally. The question was just asked a moment ago, well, what is a fair amount for reparations? It's really hard to answer that question because we're still doing damage right now. We're still allowing damage to happen right now. History is important. History is us. Who we are, where we come from. It helps us to understand where we're going. When we don't understand Toba, the Toba eruptions, when we don't understand migration, when we don't understand mutation, not evolution, mutation. We spend so much time worried about some things that don't really help us. The purpose of schooling, of teaching, should always be to grow you as you go forward and further. I have this knowledge. I have this book, and I know I've learned what's in this book so that I can reference that when I need it. I got this manual on this car so I know how to fix this engine when I need to. I learned how to fix a flat tire so that when I have a flat, I don't panic. I know what to do. Those are necessities that we know for what we need, what we want to do. But then we turn around and we find that history is not as much as a necessity for some of us. So then we don't know who we are. We don't know where we're going. And then we become lost, disenfranchised. Many of us become angry. I'm a nobody. And once you think you're a nobody, once you give up hope, what is left? You're not going to find faith. You're not going to find love because you don't have hope. You're in a nihilistic, fatalistic mentality. And unfortunately, that is what we're finding ourselves consistently fighting here in this country. Regina, that is painful to hear, my brother. Breeding like horses and dogs. Jesus being bred intentionally to breed slaves. I tell the story of one of the women in the narrative who said that they put young people, they took all their clothes off and they put them in a barn over the weekend. And they let them have sex all weekend. And if you know anything about the way bodies work, when women get together and their periods and their ovulation times start to coincide with each other, they understood this. And they put the women in a barn naked with a bunch of young men naked to create babies. Slaveholders bought, they slaved over to do this. And over the next year, all of these women had babies. And they wouldn't let the women stay back because this was their workforce, because they didn't think ahead like that, I guess. So what they did was they had the women take the babies with them to the fields. And one of the slaves said that they put these babies in a long trough off the field. And they let them lay there out there in the trough under the sun. Well, what happened was a storm came. This is real. I'll send the narrative link to you all. And it rained. And more than half of those babies drowned before they could get them out of that trough. And the woman who was talking about in the narrative said she thanked God because those babies didn't have to grow up in slavery. She thanked God for the loss of her child. That's how deep that is. And that's how painful that is. And that's why they don't want children, teenagers, young adults, college students learning this history. It's not good to learn this history. That's what they say. It hurts feelings. Teddy, you said they classify Toba eruption as a theory. They classify things as a theory when it doesn't fit the narrative that they have adjusted in history. That's really what that is. They call it pseudo-history until we find that it can be proven. A lot of history was pseudo-history until DNA, right? A lot of people say, oh, that can't be possible. But DNA didn't lie. I showed you all a few weeks ago how an archaeologist was digging in Egypt and they found a tomb. And when they dug into the tomb, they found that the mummy that they pulled out was black. And he was shocked and upset. You can see it in his face, visibly upset, because he didn't understand how that could be, because all of his academic study had told him what we're hearing in the media even right now. They're Macedonian. They're Greek. I showed you how it becomes a thing to deny your African heritage. Even in Africa, people are still doing that because they can't bear the idea of being something. And it's crazy. It's completely, utterly crazy. But it happens. It's real. Toba, I want to ask you a question, Teddy. I know you know because I teach you all this stuff, but Toba is important because when that eruption happened and people got cut off, what we call the Australoid, right? What they called it and what historians call it. This is a mutation. This is a mutation in the Asians. That's why you can trace African tribes' DNA with Asian DNA. It's there. Because when that happened and they got cut off, and over time and over different climates, the effects of that volcano had effects on those people. Human beings are adaptable. They mutate. But we're not taught that. It's easier to teach us lies. Or as Charles Lowen once said, Professor Charles Lowen once said, create a better myth. Create a better myth. Because if people get caught up in the myth, Did no one, ask questions? No one wants to know. They're comfortable with the myth. Any other question? I asked a lot of questions tonight. Now, I wanted to do that. As I said, I wasn't really feeling very well today, but I wanted to make sure I got on tonight to do the show, but also to answer questions that people had asked and sent in, and videos that they send me. And I'm going to say it again, like I said at the beginning of the program, please, please, please join some of these groups. Join Tina's Adroit Living group that she has now on Facebook and Instagram. Join the Erudition Network Interactive Black History group. The boys will have their group up soon. And it's to allow you to focus your questions on where you want to focus them to, and for us to be able to have the community talk to these different things. So if you put a question or a comment or anything in there, it would be appreciated. I'm not saying you can't message me privately, but what I'm saying is we want to all learn together. We want to all learn together. So feel free to do that and ask those questions, and we definitely will answer them as a community, as a people. But we're getting down to the last 5 minutes of the program. So I'm going to ask again, if you have anything that you want to ask about. I appreciate Tina, Portuguese, and different ones who asked questions here tonight. I thank my brothers who sent the videos and the queries in to ask questions. I hope I answered your questions. And if I did not, if you feel like there's still something missing, you could always contact me. Do it the way I asked if you can, but you can always contact me in a message, and we will definitely go deeper into that. But we learned some things tonight, hopefully. Partus equita ventrum. Sometimes I say things to people, my kids, even my wife, go like, what are you talking about? Right? And I don't do that to sound superior or intelligent. It's the things that I know we don't know. And that's why I always joke about it. Partus equita ventrum is not Harry Potter. I'm not casting spells on you. If that's the way you need to remember it, then hopefully that will help you to understand it. Partus equita ventrum was the law. It is the law over Black women's bodies. That's just the truth of it. Black women had no right to their bodies and what came out of their bodies. Rather it be from the man that they laid with or the slave owner. He owned everything. And that was the law in 1662. And you can feel free to challenge that and go look that up. But that's what it was. And, the issue with that is because it allowed rape. It allowed self-feeding of your racist institution. If a baby came out looking white, it did not mean that they were white. So it's something we really needed to know. I guess you guys don't have any other questions. So I will tell you, it's a lot going on with Erudition. A lot of things that we're trying to do, and I did not. Sorry, Teddy. I did not put the ticker on. I forget that a lot. And I know I shouldn't. If you want to help out Erudition Network, please feel free. We have a Cash App you can send something to. Everything is appreciated. It allows us to buy these mics and some of the lights that we use and different things we do to make the programs better, to allow us to do different things and start new programs that we hope to help everyone, people all over. Anything that is sent is used for that, and we greatly appreciate it as we continue to grow. Even our wonderful T-shirts, which I got my cousin made, and I got to get some more T-shirts made. We want to grow this network. We want to get more people in. Share, like, subscribe. Share, like, subscribe. So that we can get further with what we're trying to teach and what we're trying to grow. We're going into summer. We will have, on the Black History side of it, we're going to start to do fractal games. If you are not aware of what fractal is, or fractal, why am I saying fractal? Because fractals is on my mind. Fractal games. Fractals are African math. We've talked about that before. But fractal is a program that we use to do Jeopardy type games, questioning type games, but it also has other things that could be done independently. And so what we're going to start to do is try to bring some of those games and try to get some of those things online to get more people, more kids involved over the summer. Give them something to play, something to interact with. It doesn't take up all their day. They can do it right on their phone, and you can do it as a family. You can do it as a group. You can do it as a church, whatever. We want to get people to start getting interactive with their history. And so you may have seen the boys, they've played the Jeopardy type game for it. This is the website for it. Fractal is a very easy thing to do. You don't have to buy an account. When we send this out, you will be able to get on and play. It doesn't have to be Jeopardy side quiz game, but it could be a boards game. It's an independent game. And basically what it does is it just asks you questions. It gives you answers. It gives you things for you to be able to learn and challenge. So we want to start getting that done as we got kids out and start learning and pushing history in a different way. So that'll be done, Regina. They said we were animals, yet they had sex with us. They allowed our women to nurse their children. So what does it say about that? Evil. And a lot of it is evil. And this is the thing that they can't get their minds around. That's the thing that a lot of people in the society, Tina asked a question earlier, how does this history relate to us now? They can't get their minds around the cognitive dissonance of their ancestors. When there are thousands of lynching postcards in the Library of Congress, when the nation had to actually pass a law that forbade you to be able to send lynching postcards through the mail because there were so many people being killed. And there were people sending pictures that identified them as murderers, boldly standing in front of the bodies that they had killed. We have to face that history. Not just Black, not just white, everyone. We faced the history of World War II with Hitler. We face the history whenever there is an atrocity or a war, 9/11, as painful as that is. So why can't we face this history? How does that hurt people's feelings? It's a lie. It's a dissonance, and we need to challenge it and stop the hypocrisy and the foolishness. And that's why we're here on this program every Thursday. Thank you all. About 5 minutes over. I'm going to get off of here. Hey, I wasn't feeling well today, but I really appreciate all of you who participated on the program tonight. Pray for me because I really wasn't feeling well. I still don't. We've been dealing with some. I think it might be just a bug, but I really appreciate you all. Like, share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe. we need your support. And if you can just do that for us, that's something for us, because that takes us to the next person. Thank you to all of those new folks who I saw coming here tonight. Please continue to follow us. Next week, as I said, we'll be talking about a different topic, but it is a topic that is, I think, is near and dear and needs to be talked about. As we talk about kids coming out of school, we'll talk about the unteachables, and how this has affected Blacks and people of color in this country, and how we educate kids in schools. You do not want to miss these lessons that are coming up on that. So please join us next week. Regina, thank you so much. We love you. Thank you so much for joining us and being so faithful and helping us and following the programs. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm out of here. I'm going to shut my mouth. Have a great weekend. Hopefully, we may do, if I get some feedback, we may do a wrap up this Saturday. We did not do it last Saturday, and I do apologize, but there were things that came up. So hopefully we can do a quick wrap up this Saturday for those of you who couldn't join us live. We do that Saturday evening around 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. We'll be on for you to ask questions or do whatever, give you another chance to pick the brains and talk about what we've talked about over the week. All right, let me get out of here. You all have a blessed one. Thank you so much.